Christopher. I guess he's still. I hear him scratch his mic.
Yeah, I hear him a little bit.
All right, that's running. That's running. Hello there, everybody out there in Facebook and YouTube. Actually, not Facebook, YouTube land and Periscope land. We'll be starting here in just a few minutes. I do have a couple people in the Zoom room, so hang on. We will be kicking off officially in about 3 or 4 minutes. Hey there, everyone. Welcome. We'll be starting 7 o'clock Central Time, just a couple of minutes away. So please hang out. I suppose I really should get some music to play in the background, not like elevator music, something real.
I like Rebel North.
Well, thank you. I'll be sure to tell them that. Actually, Rebel North, the band, it's actually they're changing their name. It's actually the band, my pastor and friend, it's his band, and he's been kind enough to let me use his music. So I'd be glad to hear people like it.
Actually, due to your podcast and because of that band, I've actually been telling everyone, hey, I'm just an everyday American.
It's funny. I wanted to approach him about doing some music for the podcast, and that was about the time he was working on that song or on that album. And he said, "Oh, I got a perfect song for you." He played it for me. You're right. The chorus. Now, I'm not a big bluegrass fan, but the chorus just, it speaks to me. This idea of it. So I kind of picked it up as a tagline, as you may have noticed if you watch any of the videos.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. I listen to your podcasts every day that they're uploaded.
Oh, cool. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think I started listening to you, what was that, like 3 years ago? I don't even think you'd hit episode 100 yet. I've been listening to you ever since.
Yeah, I think I've been doing the podcast about 2.5, not quite 3 years. I have to look back. I have to go back and see. Because originally it was just audio. And then I added a second. I remember which I did first. I don't remember if I added the video first, or if I added the second episode a week first. But hey, it's nice to know that people are out there. Sometimes it feels like me out spitting in the wind. And well, speaking of that, it is 7 o'clock. So let me crank up the video. Whoops. Let me turn off the video. Hello there, everybody, Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study. I've got Andy, Christopher, Shawn, and Jan in the Zoom room with me. I have no idea who's out there in YouTube and Periscope land because I never trust them to actually tell me if I have people there. I always seem to end up with more comments than people that are actually attending. So we're here. We are in cyberspace, and we are here to read and study the Constitution, teach the rising generation to be free. As always, with these live broadcasts, I do have a little topic I want to kind of kick things off with, but then I will spend the rest of the episode answering whatever questions you have, as long as they're reasonably related to the Constitution or the Constitution study. So if you have any questions, place them in the chat. If you are in the Zoom room, let me know, and I will, if you're willing to, we'll actually talk. You don't have to turn on your video, but it's really nice to have a live conversation with people rather than trying to read the chats. And with that, I will tell you there's some exciting news. There's some good stuff happening here at the Constitution Study. I was at a conference this past weekend in Nashville and had a really good time. I actually taught 2 sessions, met a bunch of great people. The only downside is Davidson County, which is where Nashville is, are tyrants, and they threatened to shut the event down if people didn't wear masks. And some of the masks I saw were wonderful. One guy had one of those paper disposal masks, and it was hanging from his glasses. So it was literally hanging out here, but he was wearing a mask. The other one I loved is there was a great couple. Their mask was actually gauze, and they had put labels on it. This is tyranny. So yeah, it's that was the only downside. I had a great time, met a bunch of great people very interested, not only in studying the Constitution and learning about the Constitution, but about teaching their children about the Constitution. That is, teach the rising generation to be free. That was awesome. There was one young girl who recited the preamble to the Constitution for me. It was great. As I've been talking with Andy and Chris and Shawn and Jan, who just popped in, knowing that people are out there, knowing that it's not just me spitting in the wind, it boosts my spirits. It really makes a difference. So if you let me know you're listening and you have a question, hey, that's wonderful. Again, we will get to questions in just a minute, but I want to kick off tonight with something actually happening in my adopted state of Tennessee. This got me thinking. I found an article out of the 10th Amendment Center talking about a bill introduced into the Tennessee Senate that is going to repeal the sales tax on precious metal. Anybody's saying, okay, Paul, what does that really have to do with the Constitution? Well, the idea is Tennessee is joining several other states that are working towards using gold and silver as legal tender, as money, as an alternative to the Federal Reserve note. I find this really cool. It's back to states' rights. It's a way for states to wrest some monetary control back from the federal government. It's a way to a state to actually implement a sound money policy, not simply printing money like there's no tomorrow. I enjoy that. So I read this interesting article. I've done a little bit of research on it. They're still in the introductory stages. So a senator out of Johnson City introduced the bill, and the step they're taking is currently in Tennessee, things like precious metals are treated as commodities, meaning they're subject to our sales tax. Now, for those of you who don't know, Tennessee does not have an income tax. Yay! But we do have a sales tax. That's how we fund the government. And things like gold, silver, platinum, when you sell them, it's treated like a commodity and it's taxed. Well, this Senator Crow out of Johnson City introduced a bill that would exempt certain coins, currency, bullion from the sales tax. In other words, it would start treating them like currency, not a commodity. And of course, this gets into a much longer discussion. The important thing to understand from the constitutional standpoint, Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 says, among other things, that says that no state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation, grant letters of marque or and reprisal, coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. So states are fully able to take coin and silver, or gold and silver coin, and use them as legal tender. Now, I think Texas is the first state I heard about it. What's really cool is one of the things they're doing is, it's like Tennessee's first step. If we treat gold and silver as currency, if you want to buy one of my books and you pay with a gold coin or a silver coin, I don't, it's not this weird sales tax situation, right? If I want to buy some gold coins off of you, it's not taxed. That's good. What some other states, and again, I think Texas, I want to say one of the Dakotas, maybe, they're actually talking about setting up depositories, basically a bank based on gold and silver. Now, this gets real interesting because now wouldn't it be neat to go into your local, grocery store or coffee shop or restaurant and be able to pay with gold and silver coin? Personally, I think that's interesting. I think it's a nice finger in the eye of the federal government to say, for a state to say, we're going to take some control back. The nice thing about a depository is if they do it properly, you get the features that you would have with a bank. So you have the possibility of, well, what about a checking account where it's that, you basically take the dollar amount on the check, you figure out what that is in gold at that point, and that's the amount of gold that is credited to your account. Being that with inflation, the price of gold keeps going up and up and up. It's a very stable platform. It's a stable monetary system. Unlike maybe a cryptocurrency where the fluctuations in value are wild, tens of thousands of dollars in just a few days. Gold, silver tends to be a lot more stable. I remember reading a story. I can't remember the book I read, but it was some disaster and people were kind of reverting back to the barter system. And one of the things that they did is they used silver dimes because they were small enough to change. I like this idea of states re-exerting their power. I think it's worth checking to see if your state has any plans for gold and or silver as a currency, to maybe encourage that if it does come up, and keep an eye on this. It could be very interesting, especially with the debasement of the dollar that we're seeing, especially with the concerns about inflation. This could be a very stable place to invest your money, but still have it as something you can use as legal tender. So, like I said, I states are just getting started in this. I am curious what people think. If you have any questions, obviously pop them in. But what do you think about the idea of states getting away from, or they can't remove the Federal Reserve note? The federal government does have the authority to print money, to coin money, but giving us an alternative, giving us competition in the actual currency that we use as something would be very interesting to see. So what do people say? We have any questions? Is anybody in a state that's actually trying to do this and is set up or is trying to set up a depository, or is looking at gold and silver for state recognized legal tender? I hear a whole lot of quiet. I don't know
none that I know of. I would love to see it though. Banking institutions are something that bother me regularly, but I wanted to ask you about the federal government, particularly the Federal Reserve note. The Constitution says that the federal government has the authority to coin money, but does that also include a Federal Reserve note, being that the Federal Reserve is only quasi-government?
Yeah, well, that gets in a lot of questions when you're dealing with Congress delegating their responsibilities, delegating their power. Now, the interesting thing is while there's nothing in the Constitution that authorizes a delegated authority to then further delegate their authority, as usual, we're dealing with courts that, they say, yeah, sure. Congress, if you want to do that, fine. We've had some pretty interesting things coming out of the courts in the last week or so. According to the Ninth Circuit, the Second Amendment doesn't really exist.
I did see that. I heard about that case.
Yep.
And that was awful.
And it's not surprising. So you've got what is legal and what they get away with. Now, Jen did message in here saying that South Dakota is in discussions. I thought it was South Dakota that was doing that. By the way, I'm trying to get up to the Dakotas this summer, Jan. So maybe we can have an event up there. I have a friend of mine who's putting together an event. He's trying to shoot for the end of June, I think, in Bismarck. So if I'm up that far, maybe I can, make a swing. We can do something in South Dakota.
Well, I am in North Dakota.
Oh, you're in North Dakota?
I am.
We'll get to see you. Are you anywhere near Bismarck?
I am in Bismarck, so that would work out amazing, and we should have you on our show, which we tried really hard to get coordinated in December, and it didn't work.
Oh, yeah. So I would love to. So yeah, I know that Freedom Fest is being worked on. The last I heard, they were shooting for the end of June. They're trying to fit it in between. You've got Sturgis and you've got Harvest, and you've got all the aggregate. So they're trying to find a spot that works. And I've pretty much committed to being up there for that event. So that'll be a wonderful opportunity.
That'd be amazing. Thanks.
Yep. And so yeah, I'm trying very hard to get out to other events. It's whether it's answering questions like back to the Federal Reserve note. There's a lot in our history that I look at and going, what were they thinking? And I kind of understand it, because the problem with gold and silver is, well, there's only so much of it, and it's really kind of hard to get at. And, if you've actually got to work to get something of value, well, that's hard, where it's a lot easier just to, initially run a printing press. And now, well, let's just flip a few bits here and there, and voila, money magically appears. My understanding, now I'm not an economist. I've never played one on TV, but I understand something very basic about any commodity or anything like that. The more there is of it, the less it's worth. I mean, it's basic supply and demand, right? When there's a lot of inventory in the housing market, the prices go down. When dealerships have lots of cars on the lot, they drop the prices. It's a way to incent people to buy, and it works kind of the same for money, right? The way I understand it is, you take the amount of dollars in circulation and how fast they're moving, and that leads towards inflation. What I find absolutely amazing, and I haven't checked this in a while. Last time I checked, the price of the average home in America, although it's gone up dramatically since the 1950s, if you paid in gold, it is almost exactly the same as it was in the 1950s. So you think about, you talk about what it costs to go out to a restaurant, what groceries cost. And then you realize most of that change has nothing to do with the value of what you're buying. The milk isn't more valuable. The eggs aren't more valuable. It's the dollars you're using to purchase them have less value.
Wasn't there a book back around the time of the founding? I think it was called The Wealth of Nations, that kind of described something very similar, that a bushel of wheat is always worth, I don't know, 5 chickens, or, however they broke it down. I don't remember. It's been a very long time since I looked at the book. But it was something along those lines, that the value of things transcends ages. The only thing that doesn't is currency.
Well, again, it depends
on the value of currency.
Yeah, I was going to say, it depends on what that currency. See, most of us have don't have a lot of experience with the dollar being based in gold. I think it was 1972. I want to say. I don't remember. 72 is when we came off the gold standard, or when they tried to outlaw the owning of gold. But before then, and I used to have, but I think I might still have some in my safe. Notes that actually say, "Hey, this is worth $1 worth of gold," because the rate of change was very slow, because the rate of change of the amount of gold available was very slow. Someone didn't magically find 500 tons of gold in America. It had to be mined. It had to be processed. It was slowly changing. So price changed slowly over time. Again, when we went to a fiat currency, which is, first the Federal Reserve note, and now the fact that, most of the banking is done digitally anyway, the rate of the money supply increases so rapidly. That's why we see inflation. And since we pay for everything in dollars, we go, oh boy, inflation, it's terrible. Prices are going up. Well, it's not so much that the values of what you're paying is going up. It's what you're paying with, its value is going down. And then you got to be careful, because then you end up, like Zimbabwe, where was that? Somebody showed me they had a $1 trillion note. It was worth 1 trillion Zimbabwe dollars. And I don't think it could buy a coffee at Starbucks. I mean, and I don't mean a latte. I mean, just a plain black coffee. I don't think it could have bought you that. These numbers, they become meaningless. Now, the federal government has the authority to coin money. There's a logical extension that includes going into printing money. We've moved from a primarily coin-based cash currency to a paper-based cash currency. What's real interesting is the people who are talking about going to a cryptocurrency for the United States, because, okay, you can make a logical sense of coining money to printing money, but when you're talking about mining digital currency, I think some people might say that's a step too far from what the Constitution actually says. Of course, that's not going to stop the government. The government pays absolutely no attention to the Constitution. I've got evidence. I may not talk about it tonight, but I do have it in store, where I'll be talking about the numerous examples where the federal government and many state governments just plain ignore the Constitution, and they get away with it.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
What?
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to interject and say exactly that. They don't care what the Constitution says anyways.
Well, that's right, because we, the people, we don't hold them accountable. I'm part of a group called the Help a Reporter Out. And so I see reporters that ask for information. And there was one this morning. A reporter was asking, what is the purpose of the preamble of the Constitution? I answered that. I thought it was right up my alley. But I was talking about how, we, the people, through our states, created the Constitution, which created the federal government. Yet we pay no attention to the rules. I just recorded a video this afternoon talking about, in this case, the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, which I refer to as the zombie amendment. And I think that's scheduled to come out April 5th. But it's the fact we just ignore the rules, and nobody really holds them accountable. Nobody stands up and says, wait a second, the Constitution says you have to have a 2/3 vote to amend the Constitution. You can't pass a change to an amendment with only, a 20 vote margin in the House. That isn't passed, but we don't pay attention. But they get away with it because the American people are universally ignorant about the Constitution. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here tonight. It's one of the reasons why I do what I do at the Constitution Study. It's one of the reasons why I was at the event in Nashville, to help not only parents, but help parents teach their children to understand the Constitution. Because until we, the people, actually start saying, these are the rules, and if you don't follow them, you will be punished. Now, I'm not talking about a switch in the backyard, but it is about time our employees in the state houses in Washington, D.C., be punished when they abuse the rules, when they ignore the rules. And the fact that we haven't done it for so many decades is why we have why we have to talk about wealth tax, why we're talking about more gun control, why, the problems with the election are now banned, not only from, political discourse, but they're banned from YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and, right? Because we kept saying, well, okay, we're not really going to do anything about it. And we never dealt with that. So I got a couple questions popped in here. Let me take a look here. Pennsylvania is considering another direction. From what I understand, a mileage tax is being considered on top of gas prices. Privacy issues already questioned. Well, that's interesting. I had a discussion with my state rep and state senator about 4 years ago, because well, it's a similar situation, right? How do you pay to keep the roads up? Well, okay, a gas tax is great, but what about a mileage tax? And you're right. The biggest issue is, why is it the government's business how far I drive? Now, I kind of understand that there's a little bit of logic to it, right? Because really what the tax is supposed to do, it's supposed to pay for maintenance and development of state roads. I kind of like state roads. I don't always think the state is the best at taking care of them, but that has to be paid for. A gas tax kind of makes sense. Their big concern is, as the nation moves towards electric vehicles, what happens to the gas tax? Well, there's a lot of issues with that. And again, one is, how do you know how many miles people drove? And the other problem is, most gas taxes are only charged to residents, whereas gasoline taxes are paid by, well, whoever buys gas. So, Tennessee, we are a tourist state. You've got Nashville, you've got Memphis. People come from all over the country, from all over the world to visit these two cities. But if we use a mileage tax, they're not being taxed. So, all right, they rent a car. Maybe you could figure out how to tax the rental company. But if someone drives from, Kentucky or Georgia or Virginia or Mississippi, and they drive here, they buy gas, but they're not paying the mileage tax. It's an imperfect system. I have yet to come up with a better answer than a gas tax. And I've thought about it occasionally. When it comes to electric vehicles, there's two ways to go about doing it. I mean, sure, you could put a tax on the electricity consumed at a vehicle charging station. Vehicle charging stations generally, from what I've seen, use 220 volt. You're not plugging them into your, wall outlet. So you need charging stations. So you could add a tax into the fees that you pay for that, I suppose. But I'm really kind of curious, because electric vehicles, from a technology standpoint, are really a stopgap issue, because electricity is not inherently energetic. And it's a little odd. So let me explain. Electricity is the moving of electrons, right? Now, if you go out in the backyard and you drill a hole and oil comes up, you can light it on fire and it burns. You've got potential energy in the oil that comes out of the ground. You don't have, electricity itself needs to be manufactured, needs to be generated, and it needs to be stored. The storage is still very problematic. And people forget that when they plug in their car, they're consuming electricity, but that electricity had to be generated from something. And that usually means coal, natural gas, sometimes nuclear, a little bit of hydro and other things. But the electricity is a method of conducting energy, not creating energy, right? So you still need something to create the energy, to create the electricity. So I'm less worried about that from an electric car standpoint. The question then becomes, what does become the next fuel, right? So electricity isn't fuel. It's a way of conducting energy. It's not really fuel. What is the next fuel? Will it be hydrogen? Yeah, I don't know. They're still working on the technologies. And as things develop, we'll have to figure out what goes along that point from that standpoint. So, and again, states, remember, pretty much every state politician I've talked to, they're looking for a way to make money. Personally, they're looking for a way to make money, but they're just looking for ways to find money that they can bring into state coffers to pay what they want to pay for. They're really not concerned whether or not the tax they're collecting is at all related to what they're spending the money on, which to me is a problem. If we want to pay a gasoline tax to pay for the roads, there's a relationship there. If they want to pay an electricity tax to deal with some of the infrastructure, there's a logical connection there. The problem is politicians don't work with those connections. They simply see a source of money and they want it. So I'm not surprised. Yeah, privacy issues are one of several things. So let's see. So with metals and cryptocurrency both being finite and decentralized, would they not both be better than fiat paper money and breaking the Federal Reserve? I agree that metals, well, again, you've got the value versus the convenience. Now, I'm not a cryptocurrency expert, but I spent 30 years working in IT. I've spent 30 plus years working with computer programs and algorithms, and cryptocurrency is fiat currency. The limitations are all numbers in source code, right? They are not finite. I use as a perfect example, Bitcoin. Everyone says, there's only 20 million Bitcoins that will ever be mined, except I remember several years ago, Bitcoin split and they doubled the number of potential Bitcoins. You had Bitcoin and then Bitcoin Cash. Suddenly there was the potential for twice as many coins as there was originally. And all it takes for them to change that 20 million number to some other number are the major stakeholders to agree. Now, the advantage with cryptocurrency over a government-backed fiat currency is there are so many people involved in the decision. It is a lot harder to make a change like that. You couldn't simply have an executive order that says, we're going to up the number of Bitcoins from 20 million to 30 million. It doesn't work that way. I don't know how many master nodes there are in the network, but you'd have to get all of them to agree. And it's not that it's impossible, but it will take a lot before we get there. Metals, on the other hand, their finality is questionable because they keep finding more and mining more, but the rate of change is slow. And that's the advantage of metal and to cryptocurrency in my mind is the rate of change of the amount of either metal or cryptocurrency available is slow. That makes them potentially more stable. Now, the problem is metals, because of their history, their value changes very slow. Cryptocurrency, because it has such a short history, even though the rate of change of the amount of cryptocurrency available is slow, the value change is drastic. So, you can go in and buy a Bitcoin today and, tomorrow it could be worth $50,000. The day after it could be worth $10,000. It's way too volatile, in my opinion, to really work as a currency. But what I like is the idea, let's get the control of the money out of the hands of people that have no skin in the game. Now, the Federal Reserve is kind of weird because they're supposed to be a quasi-governmental agency. They're supposed to be politically independent. I've yet to meet anybody that works in any of these agencies that doesn't have a relationship with politicians. Getting it out of their hands, having the people in control to me is a much better idea. So yes, I agree. Metals would be better. Cryptocurrency I think it's going to get there one day. There's some technological issues I think that have to work out. It has to become a lot more stable in its value. And the other big problem, at least with Bitcoin, is how long it takes to resolve a transaction. Basically, until you can walk into a coffee shop, hand them your Bitcard wallet to buy a cup of coffee and walk away, it's going to remain this investment type currency rather than a truly day-to-day useful currency. That's my opinion. I'm not an expert but that's what I see. I like metals, but not cryptocurrency because crypto is still a computer program. Exactly. Now, my issue is not so much the idea behind it is I want to explain this properly. The way the cryptocurrency works, the reason it's called cryptocurrency, it's partially because it's a cryptographic representation. So your crypto dollars, your Bitcoins, we'll just use Bitcoins because everybody knows them. There are dozens of others, but probably hundreds of others, but we'll use Bitcoin. So when you buy Bitcoin, what actually happens is you have an application called a wallet that has your Bitcoin information and it's stored encrypted. And when you go to spend it, you don't actually hand somebody something. You basically give them a cryptographic key that says you're allowed to take X amount of my Bitcoin out of my account. It's because you retain a copy of your currency, your Bitcoins. That's a good thing, right? Because if someone says, oh no, we're going to go change that. Well, wait a second. I have my copy. That's a good thing. The bad news is you lose your copy, you lose your wallet, your Bitcoin is gone. I mean, it is irretrievable. So my concern again is because it's a computer program, because it is still software, it can be manipulated. It's not as easy as certain other things, but that's my opinion. Well, again, cryptocurrency and calling it a computer program may be a little is a simplistic term for it, but all cryptocurrency is data stored in usually a blockchain ledger. It is bits. It is ones and zeros in a computer somewhere. There is no such thing as a physical Bitcoin. It's a ledger entry. And that ledger just happens to be in a computer. Actually, it's hundreds of computers that are all storing a copy of this ledger. That's the blockchain technology. The fact that it's distributed means it is harder for any one entity to manipulate it, but you're still dealing with data. Now, what's interesting is we're all used to it today, right? Because we have credit cards, right? I mean, that's how credit cards work. You have a credit card, you have a debit card. You're not handing them money. They look, that you're handing them this piece of plastic that some computer somewhere says, oh, all right, well, you just charged $5 to your credit card. So we're going to flip some bits over here and voila, there's $5 out of your checking account or savings account or whatever your debit card's against. So it's still computer software. It's a little more complex than a simple computer program, but it's still computer software. Yes, hacked or alt. Okay. Let's see. All right. Blockchain. Yeah, but again, blockchain is just a way of storing a ledger. Blockchain isn't mythical. The advantage to blockchain is because there are dozens and hundreds and sometimes thousands of copies of the ledger all over the world, it becomes really hard to manipulate, right? Because you can't just manipulate one. You have to get everybody to agree to the manipulation. So that's trickier. Okay. Let's see what are the topics we got floating around in here. Let's see. Rulings. Oh, great. First of all, courts don't make rulings, but all right. So apparently there's some news flying around. Evanston, Illinois is going to provide. Are they actually providing reparations? I know they were.
Yeah, they just passed it yesterday, 8-1.
Oh, okay. So I'm curious, who's going to pay and who's going to get the money?
Supposedly it said it was supposed to be sales tax from marijuana, like because since Illinois legalized marijuana, that's supposedly where the tax is coming from to provide the reparations.
Okay. So what we have are people who have not been shown to have anything to do. None of them, their families, none of that has been shown to have anything to do with slavery or other crimes, but they're going to be charged a tax to pay for something they did not do. I mean, that's basically what we're talking to, right?
Yeah, basically at this point, I blame the people of that particular city for voting on it. So it's embarrassing.
Again, remember what we're looking at. You have there's a fundamental disconnect in most politicians between the money coming in, where the money coming in comes from, and where the money going out goes to. You basically at this point are, and again, I'm curious of who's going to get paid and under what conditions. But before we get to that, you have a city in Illinois that says we are going to charge our residents or people who come to our town a tax to pay reparations. They're going to pay a tax for something they did not do. That's political foolishness. That's a, we want to look good by paying reparations. We got to come up with the money somewhere. So it was the same logic behind the income tax. It's nothing new under the sun. I am very curious of who they plan on paying, because I can't wait till some, poor white, lady who happens to smoke marijuana is paying through her taxes is paying reparations to some rich black family Evanston, if memory serves, it's not that far from Chicago. It'd be real. I can't wait to the first example of someone saying, yeah, we collected these, see all these poor food stamp welfare recipients buying their marijuana, the taxes of which are paying sales tax to this person that has this multi-million-dollar home. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Anything else? I haven't gotten one message from YouTube or Periscope. I only show one person watching on Periscope, but I haven't gotten one question from anybody there. So I don't know what's going on. Maybe YouTube doesn't like me. I mean, wouldn't be the first time. Social media, I'm there so that people can hear me, but I don't trust them as far as I could throw them. Ninth Circuit opinion, right? Tunnel Lord. The Ninth Circuit issued an opinion. It did not issue a ruling. Federal courts do not issue rulings. They are not.
I'd just like to point out that the reason we put quotations around ruling is we know it's opinion. We didn't know how to say that. So
I refuse to give up the English language. They opine. They do not rule. They've issued an opinion, and it is. And again, now I haven't read the opinion yet. I've heard about it. I want to get the details. From what I understand so far, the basic the output was that the Second Amendment does not give you the right to openly carry a firearm. Apparently, they haven't read the Second Amendment, because it says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It doesn't say the right to concealed carry. It doesn't say, it can't be infringed, except it doesn't. And in fact, Tunnel Lord, you sent me a legislation out of Idaho about their I think it's their Second Amendment, some Second Amendment Protection Act. I did actually do a little research on it. I have not had the chance to really digest it and get back to you, but what do they call it? The Small Arms Protection Act, I guess is what they're calling it. And it's kind of good news, bad news. Again, apparently these people have never actually read the Constitution of the United States. But I want to take a look at the Idaho Constitution as well. But before we go on, I do want to make, there's one point that popped into my head that I wanted to make. Understand what reparations are a claim that you can punish the child for the acts of the parent. Now, unless they've found somebody who owned a slave, reparations are punishing the child for the acts of the parent. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound very just to me. And in fact, what I find most interesting is if they truly wanted to punish somebody for, if they really wanted to punish somebody, yes, they should punish slave holders. All right, I could see that, except they were not breaking the law at the time. The law at the time said it was perfectly allowable. Well, I should say the statutory law of the time, but that's a whole another issue. But probably the biggest offenders when it comes to racist abuse of colored people in this country are the state governments. I mean, look at it. You look at it. In fact, if you look at history, the greatest abuser of human rights for colored people, for blacks, for Asians, but we'll focus on blacks. We'll focus on African Americans. The greatest abusers were democratic governments. In other words, governments run by the Democratic Party. Jim Crow laws, if I understand it, is if not exclusively, almost exclusively came out of democratically controlled state governments. Why isn't anybody going after the Democratic Party for reparations?
Now that's not fair. What about the Great Switch? I keep hearing about the Great Switch where the parties changed sides. I'm just kidding, but
yeah, that's called the Great Bait and Switch. The Great Switch is this theory is that after the Democrats lost the war between the states, and after they lost in the civil rights movement, because you got to remember the Civil Rights Act was passed almost exclusively by Republicans, and the Democrats figured out that they had to have Democratic support. They came up with this theory is that, all the racists have when I was a kid, someone would say something mean to you and you go, I'm rubber, you're glue. It bounces off me and sticks to you. That's the Democratic theory of the Great Switch. Oh, it's not us anymore. We just we gave you all the cooties. And it's a way to avoid responsibility. It's a magician's trick. But I'll say something else that's politically incorrect. I want you to look around and I want you to ask yourself, look at the people who are judging people based on race. What do you call people who judge other people based on the color of their skin or their ethnic heritage? We call them racist, don't we? Well, who are the people that are judging themselves most by race in society today? I need to say nothing more. So, that's, but that's it. I wanted to make the point about reparations because it's a scam. It's a way for people to make themselves feel better by giving something to someone else, but making you pay for it. It's greed. It's taking money from other people to be shown being generous. That's greed. That's, I'm sure there's a lot of other adjectives I can use. It certainly is not generosity. It is not generosity to covet someone else's money or to pay a bill with somebody to force someone else to pay your bills for you.
I got a question for you.
Yeah, Jan, go ahead.
I have heard that, in addition to Krispy Kreme offering free donuts for those that get a vaccine, there are some tribes in my state that are offering loyalty payments to all of the teachers and staffs at the school of like $1,500 if you're vaccinated by a certain date, or if you don't meet that date criteria, then they'll pay you a lesser amount if you get it done by the 20 something of May.
I'm sorry. What's a loyalty payment?
Exactly. What they're terming it is disturbing because it sounds so coercive. It sounds to me as though they are guilting everybody. And I don't know who their loyalty is supposed to be to. Is it to the tribe? Is it to the children? Is it to the teachers union? But if those dollars are anything to do with any of the COVID fund, and it's found that they are federal dollars, that makes me a party because I pay taxes. That makes me a party to what they're doing, and I don't approve. It seems like, I don't know. It seems like not legal to me. I don't know.
So a couple points. I have no constitutional issue with Krispy Kreme saying, get your shot, get a free donut. They're a private company. If that's what they want to do, that's fine. We use encouragement all the time. We all have these little loyalty cards, right? You go to the grocery store and you get points and you get something for it. We all have loyalty programs. I, for years, flew, and every airline had their own loyalty program. The problem I have, and this is where it gets interesting when you're dealing with Indian tribes, because Indian tribes are supposed to be separate nations. And of course, they're not always treated. They're treated that way when it's beneficial to somebody. They're not treated that way when it's not beneficial to somebody. But you're right. If they are using public funds, especially U.S. taxpayer funds, that's called bribery. Right? That's a payoff. That would be no different than saying, oh, by the way, if you pay, well, I don't want to use that. That'd be a less than stellar example. I mean, it was no different than, look at Obamacare, right? Do what we want, or we're going to take money away from you. It's the other side of the same coin. We'll give you money if you do what we want. What's it? The difference between giving you money for doing something or taking away for not doing it is two sides of the same coin. It's bribery. It's flat out bribery. Now, if a private individual, if a private organization wants to offer something to encourage people to do that, that's fine, as long as what they're asking them to do is not illegal. When the government now says we are going to pay people either directly or through a supposedly independent third party, that's bribery. Listen, I have a problem with the fact that it's the government that has purchased all the vaccines, that is distributing the vaccines, that's determining who gets to get the vaccine. Why? All right. The federal government has no legal authority to involve themselves in medical decisions. Why is the federal government buying all the vaccines? Why?
For public safety.
No.
Public safety, the health of the nation, right?
No, it's for public control. You must get if you want your vaccine, you will come genuflect to us. You'll do it in the order that we tell you to. You will do it on our terms. You will get the vaccine we approve. Right? This has not. They may disguise it as public safety. If this was truly public safety, the government would get the heck out of the way and let people figure out what is the best process for doing this. I mean, look at how many stories have you seen about vaccines that had to be thrown out because they were not delivered in time because, oh, well, we didn't have enough for the people of the right group. If you've got 1,000 doses of vaccine, but only 800 people in the age group you're willing to give, you're going to throw out 200 doses of vaccine because they don't meet you don't have enough people to meet that criteria. That's crazy. Right? Then I just saw one of the Biden administration was sending COVID vaccine to Canada and Mexico. Why are we buying vaccines for Canada and Mexico? Because we have decided that the government knows best. We are no longer the land of the free. We are ruled from Washington, and we're ruled from our state houses. And most people don't even know it. They're like the proverbial frog in the pot. They're dead. They just don't realize it yet. Well, they've been enslaved. The government, you now have the government telling you whether or not you can open your business. They're telling you whether or not you're essential. They're telling you whether or not you can get a vaccine. Oh, if you want a vaccine, you can only get it from them, only the ones they approve. Does that sound like a free country to anyone? It certainly doesn't sound like a free one to me. And yes, Shawn, as long as you keep reminding us that you're kidding, we recognize that, sarcasm is the pinnacle of wit. And trust me, I like a good sarcasm font as much as anyone else. Right. But I keep coming back to the point. Why is it the government that's the only one that can tell you which vaccine to take and will tell you when to take it? Now, again, if you're talking about recommendations, right, you want to, I agree that I think the ones most at risk should be have the first opportunities to get the vaccine. If I were going for the vaccine, and if there was somebody, if there was a limited amount, and if there was somebody who is more at risk than I am, I'd step aside. Would everybody do that? No, but we don't live in a perfect world. But what makes people think that just because these people work for government, they know any better than everybody else?
I worry about what happens after all of the voluntary vaccines go out and whether or not there is an attempt to make it mandatory vaccinations like there was mandatory mask mandate.
You will see, what is the account? Is it Johnson? There's a Supreme Court case.
I did hear about that one.
Huh?
I did hear about that one.
Yeah.
That was the whole point that I was making.
Yeah. And it is often, like many cases, it is often misrepresented. The idea that for public safety, people can be forced to take a vaccinate, can be forced to be inoculated. The simple answer is, if someone wishes to commit an assault on your body against your will, what are you going to do about it?
I'll keep my opinion to myself on that, but I feel like everybody here knows what I'd say.
Well, yeah, it's the same thing. Now, for example, my wife is immunocompromised. So plus I have serious reservations about how some of the vaccines were made using aborted tissue. I have moral quandaries about that. But again, if you're going to come and commit an assault on my body, I'm not going to stand by willingly. And the same for assault on my body with my wife or my daughter. That's assault, and I have a right to defend myself, and I have a right to defend my family. And now, again, I've talked to my sheriff. I haven't specifically talked to him yet about vaccines, but I've talked to him about other things to believe that he would stand with me if the state were stupid enough to try this, and if the county that I live in a rural county, if that was stupid enough to try this, that he would order his deputies not to force anyone to take a vaccine against their will. That is an assault on our body. That is a deprivation of life. That is a deprivation of the property you have in your body. And until they can prove that you are a threat to others, right, via due process, they have no case. But again, we don't know any better. We've been indoctrinated in this idea that government Danny knows best. And if there's one thing that I'm trying to repeat over and over again, is just because someone gets a government paycheck doesn't make them brilliant. It doesn't make them smarter than anyone else, doesn't make them more righteous than anyone else, doesn't make them a better person than anyone else. They are still a human being. And if you would not trust a stranger off the street to make that decision for you, why would you trust a stranger just because they get a paycheck from a government? Okay. All right. I'm not seeing anything off of the YouTube and the Periscope. I'm wondering, I'm going to check. Anybody else have any questions? I want to take a quick peek while somebody comes up with another question for me. Nothing. We don't have anybody coming up with anything good today. Well, gee, it still says I'm live. So YouTube still thinks I'm out there. It says I got 5 views, but I've never seen 5 people in the room. All right. I'm just making sure. Anything else today? Legalized voter fraud. Oh, HR 1. Yeah, I've written about that. That is, where was I? I was dealing with the election in the state of Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania Constitution requires that elections be free, fair, and transparent. I like that because that to me that's what you want in an election, right? You want it to be free from external influence. You don't want people being forced to vote one way or the other. You want it to be fair. You want everyone that has the legal right to vote has a reasonable opportunity to vote. And you want it to be transparent. You want to know that your vote gets counted and that the people who are not allowed to vote, it's not counted. But look at HR 1. It gets rid of free. Well, I could say maybe it compromises free, right? Because now we're talking about, well, actually maybe not so much free. Let me rephrase that. It's not so much free. We're talking about compromising fair and transparent, right? So the idea is we are no longer going to make sure that the people who are exercising the right to vote actually have that right to vote. The right to vote is limited to citizens of the district in which you are voting. Now, we're not going to bother, and again, if we're not going to keep track, if we're not going to do checks to make sure that the person that is casting the ballot actually is the person who's supposed to cast the ballot, that person is eligible, well, then why? Then an election becomes a sham. It's the same thing they have in Iran. It's the same thing they used to have, probably still do have in Venezuela. Sure, you can show up and you can cast a ballot, but it doesn't really matter because the person the government wants is going to win 99-1. It becomes a sham. Here's the part that disturbs me about HR 1. Article 1, Section 8. No, not 8. Where is it? I want to say Section 4. There we go. Article 1, Section 4. The times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. But the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations, except as to the place of choosing of senators. So the time, place, and manner of electing senators and representatives is supposed to be primarily in the hands of the state legislatures. Problem number 1. Other entities besides the state legislatures have taken over that role in many, many, many of the states. And that isn't being dealt with. In fact, I just saw an article, where is it? Wisconsin is finally going to investigate voter fraud in the recent election. Better late than never, I guess. Now, it does say that Congress may alter the regulations regarding the time, place, and manner of holding elections. But this, I think, is going too far. This may match the letter of the law, but not the spirit of the law. And the idea being that, sure, the states want to have the time, place, and manner, but we're going to have a national election day. So we want to modify the time so that the election day is the same in all of the states. Congress can do that. When you're starting getting into the places and manners and having the federal government in control of elections, to me, that's just more opportunity for fraud. That's more opportunity for malfeasance. You have elected people in Washington who have no clue what it's like in South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, Tennessee, but they're going to decide how we should hold our elections. They're going to decide how much time there should be for someone to have an election. They're going to decide who should get mail-in ballots, when those mail-in ballots should be sent in, how they should be counted. This is, again, stripping the states of a legal power they have. And I think the problem I have is they stand a good chance of getting away with it because they're matching it to the letter of the law. We're going to alter this. I forget the politics of it. Do you really, Congress on average has a 15 to 30% approval rating. Do you really trust them to be in control of your elections? Do you really think you're going to go to your state representative, to your district representative and say, hey, I don't like the way you're doing this. We should fix this. Do you really think that's going to make a difference? Do we really want to centralize that much power, that much more power in Washington, D.C.? We complain about the size of the federal government. Well, it's there because every time they go to grab more power, we sit back and say, yeah, okay. I think it's about time we stand up and say, listen, you may legally be able to alter the times, places, and manner of choosing senators and representatives. But this is too far. No, we won't stand for this. And we're going to look at it and say, no. Like I said, the hard part is it's the letter of the law. It's not the spirit of the law, but it certainly is the letter of the law. But let's face it, nobody in Washington really thinks they're going to lose their job over this vote, do they? Do you really think anybody sitting in the Capitol is worried that if they don't vote for this right, they're going to lose their job? Nah. I think it's going to go through because the American people don't care. And the Democrats have shown themselves to be more than willing to trample whatever they need to get what they want. I mean, just look at the Iowa election, right? There was, what was this? They had a special election and the Republican won by 6 votes. So Nancy Pelosi is challenging it in the House because it was only 6 votes.
There's 2 things that whenever I'm talking with somebody about the Constitution that I get really caught up on. Mm-hmm. The first one is supremacy and whether or not a federal law can supersede state law and, who ultimately has the authority over an issue. The second one, of course, is always the Second Amendment, because how do you enforce supremacy? I argue the Second Amendment is the last resort of enforcing supremacy, as we, the people, are the final arbiters of the Constitution. So, I always get really hooked up on those 2 topics. And I would argue that this H.R. 1 falls completely out of the bounds of any sort of federal authority. Voting is left 100% up to the states, other than what is explicitly described in the Constitution.
Well, I just read to you from Article 1, Section 4 that says Congress may at any time by law make or alter the regulations regarding the times, places, and manners of holding elections for senators and representatives. That's the language.
Right. And short of those specific points, they have absolutely no business interfering in state elections. Only those.
Well, again, yes. All right. So, first of all, there is one and only one national election in this country, and that's when the presidential electors vote. So all votes, all elections are state elections, state and local elections. They may be elections for federal office, but those elections are state elections. The problem you run into is, yes, they can dictate how you elect senators and representatives. Do you really, Shawn, where do you live? What state?
Wyoming.
Wyoming. Is Wyoming going to have two separate elections, one for senators and representatives and one for their state offices? They're perfectly legal to do that. If they're willing to do that, hey, more power to them. But that's, that's the way they would have to deal with this, is saying, okay, that's the election for senator and representative. We're going to have a whole separate election for everyone else. Presidential electors, state office holders, local, county. Yep. We're going to have a whole separate election. We'll have a whole separate ballot. We're going to have a whole separate counting. Is Wyoming really going to do that?
Well, I mean, if all they're doing is telling you the time and place, then
again,
that
times, places, and manners. It is the manner of holding elections.
I don't know, that's kind of ubiquitous. It's really hard to pin down that argument.
Oh, it's not really hard. It just isn't what we want. The spirit of the law is that the times, places, and manners of holding elections for senators and representatives is supposed to be decided by the state legislature. But by giving Congress the ability to alter that, my understanding was, the thought was, yeah, we want to have some consistency. We don't want to have some senators and representatives elected in January, others in July, some in August, some in June. We want to have some levels of uniformity. The question is, how far does that go? That isn't said. It's one of those things where it's kind of an open-ended statement. It's the sad part is Congress has the ability to alter the regulations regarding the times, places, and manners of electing federal senators and federal representatives. All right. It was supposed to be a power that they would really use lightly, but power corrupts. Absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. We've given more power to Washington. Why are we surprised that they're corrupting it? They've shown over and over that they'll do it. The best thing we can do is to, again, for the people to stand up and say, no, this is not what you were given that power for. You were given that power to make sure things were standardized, especially regarding times and places. You were not supposed to be involved in the minutia of how we hold elections. Legally you can, but that wasn't what you were sent here for. That wasn't that wasn't the spirit behind this. And for states to stand up and say, if that's how you're going to do it, then fine, we will hold our own elections, because we will not be held hostage to what a politically biased Congress is abusing their power for. They have the power to make these changes. They're abusing it for political ends. They legally can do that for these elections, right? For senators and representatives, fine, but we're going to ignore them for everything else. And
I must not be understanding exactly what HR 1 is attempting to do.
HR 1 has a whole bunch, and I wrote an article about it. I think I called it the Election Corruption Act or something like that. But it sets up a whole bunch of rules about who can register to vote, mail-in ballots, early voting, how late mail-in ballots can be counted, requirements for signatures and stuff like that. I think I think it deals with voter ID laws. It's a fairly sweeping rewriting of most of the state's election laws.
If you can tell me where to find your work, I'll go read that.
Yeah, if you go to constitutionstudy.com, and let me find out. I'll give you the article title if you give me just a minute. But yeah, there's a whole bunch in there. And what's interesting is in that article, I didn't even go into the details of what they were trying to change. I just got into the details of their claim of power, their claim of authority to do that. It was their claim of authority is, I don't want to say, well, I'm sorry. It's article number 249, episode 249, HR 1, the Corruption of Future Elections Act. And I go into some detail. And again, at that point, I'm only focusing on the justification they give for their power to do this, some of which is iffy, to say the least. But the fact still remains that Congress has the authority to alter the regulations regarding the time, places, and manners of holding elections for senators and representatives. And that is that is a power that's being abused because they get away with it. And as long as they get away with it, they're going to keep doing it. All right. There's some notes coming in here. All politics are local, snarky. Okay. Getting involved in local communities, we can slowly but surely. Oh, Jan, that is well put. I love it. Let me, for those who may be on YouTube, may not be on YouTube. Jan said that all politics are local, being snarky. If we start getting involved in local park board, school board, township, or city commission, if we start getting those committees, we can slowly but surely change first the city, then the county, then the state, then the country. Absolutely, Jan. I've been trying to focus on that more and more for the last several months. Washington is not the answer to all of our problems. Let's see. She goes on. The problem is the left is organized and well-funded, and the right is complacent and lazy. Okay, we need to get involved because if we all do a little, no one has to do a lot. The silent majority is not longer silent, but they are no longer the majority either. Okay, and Jen, you're right. It's not that Washington is unimportant, but they're not supposed to be the center of the universe. You're absolutely right. I was talking about this at the conference a couple of times, and I make the point: we have very little influence on Washington. I mean, let's face it. When was the last time you tried to get a meeting with your rep, much less your senator? It's near impossible. Unless they want something from you, it's near impossible. It's easier, but still fairly difficult to get time with your state representative, your state senator, or whatever term your state uses. It's easier, but it's still not that easy. Locally, though, and this is why I agree, the one thing I would change is I would also add your sheriff to that list of local people to be involved with, because there's a group I deal with called the Institute on the Constitution, and they have a video called Interposition. And it's the idea that we not only have three branches of government, we have three levels of government, three layers of government. You have your local government, then the state government, then the federal government. And then obviously you've got international, got foreign affairs. And the idea is those layers are supposed to defend you from all the layers above you, right? So the federal government is supposed to defend you from foreign influences. The state is supposed to defend you from both foreign influences and federal influences. Local is supposed to defend you against foreign influences, federal influences, and state influences. There are layers. It's a protection in depth. Would be the strategic term for it. We spend so much time focusing on Washington that we've let the state houses get away with well, maybe not murder, but certainly get away with an awful lot. We've let our counties devolve into sycophants of the state. I made a point when I talked to my sheriff of saying, I want you to understand, I want your deputies to understand when they show up at my door, their first and primary job is to protect the rights of everyone there. After that, they can worry about state law, right? They can't worry about, they're not supposed to worry about federal law, but first they protect rights. They swore an oath to the Constitution, first and foremost, of the state of Tennessee and the United States. That is their first and primary job. And he agreed. Now, does that save me from the election law HR 1? No. It does save me from a lot of the other stuff that's coming out of Washington. It should save me from a lot of stuff that's coming out of Nashville. But you're right. We have a lot more influence locally. We can create buffer zones around ourselves. If the whole world goes crazy, but you and your neighbors are in a fairly sane place, you're protecting each other, your government is doing its job to protect your rights. Well, you can worry less about what's going on in Washington in your state capital because you've got some protection there. And like you said, if I worry about my county and you worry about your county and the neighbor worries about their county, sooner or later those counties are going to add up and will start impacting the state. And if we start impacting some states, that'll eventually change Washington. Now, it's not the quick answer. It's not the get fixed quick scheme. It's not about it's not about we're going to fix this overnight. It's taken a long time to make this mess. But understanding that if we fix what's closest to us first, if that becomes our first priority to fix, that will eventually propagate. That'll propagate to other places. And Jan, what you're talking about was 7 boundaries, not layers. When I've listened to the IOTC, they talk about 3. You've got 3 branches and 3 layers. So I'm not quite sure what you're talking about, where that's coming from. And again,
if you have the division between legislative and executive, and judicial in each of the layers, you end up with 7 boundaries.
Right. Yes.
That's
right.
what I said layers and I meant to say boundaries, so I corrected it.
Okay. Gotcha. Yes. So yeah, for me, most people can understand 3 branches and 3 layers, and it's kind of like tic-tac-toe, but it's that idea of defense in depth. So
I think the problem that a lot of people kind of don't understand the difference between a layer cake and a marble cake. And a lot of our representatives are trying to make it marble. They're trying to blend things so that they have more control. Regional health districts, regional schools, regional everything. So that way that the government has more control and the people have less control. So I like the layer cake better than the marble cake.
Exactly. It's a question of, like you said, it's a question of control. I talk about freedom. I talk about liberty. Both of those involve being in control of what you can do. Every time we try to get someone else to fix our problem for us, we give up control. So every time we ask any government to fix what we should be dealing with ourselves, we're giving up control. And we've just become so enamored, so inured to this idea that, the government should fix, there should be a law. Government should fix that for me. We've turned ourselves into serfs. That's why I said, I have a hard time referring to us as a land of the free, because think about what you can do without getting government permission first. All right, now we're going to make, now Jan's going to have to give us all cake. That's what we've decided is Jan's going to have to give us all cake. So Jan, if I do end up in North Dakota this summer, when I get up to North Dakota, I hope to see you. I hope you don't show up with a marble cake.
Not a chance.
All right. Well, if we got anything else, we kind of had a wide ranging discussion. That's great. That's good. Before we head out, if you haven't already signed up for the newsletter, please head over to the website, check out the newsletter. It's free to sign up. I send out one newsletter a month unless something really urgent happens. I do have some announcements coming up, and I really want to make sure that everybody is aware of them. I think it's pretty exciting. I can't announce it yet, but it will be soon. The next one comes out on April Fool's Day, but it won't be an April Fool. There'll be some good news. So if you're not already on the mailing list for the newsletter, please sign up for that. There is also, take a look at the Constitution Scholars site. If you're not familiar with it, there's two main goals. One of it is just so we can meet each other. It's a free site. You register for free, and you can join the federal group. You can join your state group. And what I've started doing is I get a bunch of news feeds, and I get a lot of interesting stories that maybe aren't really related to a topic I'm working on, but they might be related to a state issue. And I've been putting those in the state issue. So in the mornings, I go through my list from the night before, and I've been popping those in, trying to get discussions started. People start asking themselves. In fact, Tunnel Lord, I have to double check. I think I've already posted that in the Idaho, the thing you sent me in the Idaho, but I'll double check and make sure I send more information in it, because I want us to, we are not alone. I believe it was Benjamin Franklin said that we must all hang together or else we will surely hang separately. We're not alone. So the Constitution Scholars is a great place to find people, to make connections, to have discussions. There's a friend-based system. There's a messaging system. There's a group wall system where you can post. That is there, and that is free. That will remain free. But I'm also set up what I call the scholarship program. The idea of people who want to truly become scholars, to apprentice, journeyman, and master becoming a scholar. And I'm actually building out that curriculum as we're speaking. I'm working on it so that people who want to not only want to learn about the Constitution, but want to learn how to study the Constitution and teach others. I'm building curriculum in that organization for that purpose. That class, that structure is a fee, is a subscription, but you don't have to. If you do want to sign up and check out your state group, I would highly encourage it. Andy's an apprentice. Yep, he's in the apprentice group, and there's more stuff coming. I'm still working on it. I've been crazy busy the last couple of months. So, court ruling on drones. Shawn, I haven't seen a court opinion on drones, although I'm sure I probably won't like it. Do you have any information on it?
I believe it was the Third Circuit. I'm not 100% certain of the circuit, but it was a law enforcement officer flew a drone over somebody's property and basically said that they were stockpiling garbage. And the case got thrown out of court because it was an unmanned drone flown over somebody's property in order to, without a warrant was right. The issue. And the judge said, you could have got a warrant, but you failed to do so. Thus, your pictures are inadmissible. So I would argue that it was a win, but also it's court opinion. So, it's murky water. But I mean, ultimately, it was the government saying you failed to get a warrant. So thus your evidence is inadmissible. So I did like that.
Yeah, I if you can, send me a link because I'd like to find out more and share that. But I agree. That's hey, sometimes the courts do get it right. We complain when the courts get it wrong. They are part of the government. We have the right to petition our government for redress of grievance. Apparently somebody went and said, I have a grievance against this law enforcement agency because they performed an unreasonable search. They searched my property without a warrant. The fact that they did it by flying over me with an unmanned drone is immaterial. They searched my property without a warrant and without what's called an exigent circumstance. they weren't in hot pursuit of somebody. And it's great. And hopefully, some other court won't decide to overturn it. It's one of the reasons why I say we cannot put our faith in courts. Courts are manned by people. Judges are men and women, and they are flawed and they are imperfect. They make mistakes. Sometimes they just plain have their own agendas and place their agenda above their oath. And so the courts are, it's great when they get it right. But if I would not hold my breath on if my future was dependent on the opinion of a court. But that's good news. Send it to me. Let me see if I might want to write on it. I might want to. Then again, it might be in one of my news feeds I just haven't gotten to yet. But
yeah, I'll see if I can find the opinion and send it to you.
Excellent. All right, well, everyone, thank you very much. We will be back. Was it a couple weeks? It'll be the second week of April, the second Thursday in April. We'll have another live stream. I have no idea what I'll be talking about. But I'll send out some emails as we get closer. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Be safe, be free, and we will see you next time in the Constitution Study.